We have lots to cover in today's video, including all the latest trade talk around the NHL. Today's rumors are focused on teams like the Maple Leafs, the Habs, as well as the Edmonton Oilers. We've also got some updates on a Jacob Trouba trade that was reportedly blocked by the player in his no-move clause. We have the latest on McGroarty and his attempt to exit Winnipeg, plus the latest on Trevor Zegras. Could he still be moved? Which teams are still interested? We'll discuss that. Plus, we have some signings, including some more 2024 draft picks. We have news on an Islanders prospect, updates as well in the Columbus Blue Jackets head coaching search, as well as some other news around the league, including the Arizona Coyotes, Alex Merulo, Avalanche front office news, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to cover here today, lots of rumors, but first we got lots of other news items to get into as well. Let's first start with an update on some signings. We got some more prospects and free agent signings to take a look at around the NHL here. The San Jose Sharks have signed their second first round pick of the 24 entry draft. Of course, they've already come to terms with first overall pick Macklin Celebrini. Today they signed left shot defenseman Sam Dickinson of the London Knights. So he, like Celebrini, gets his 3-year entry-level contract. Of course, he gets all the top bonuses. We'll have an opportunity to earn lots extra, but certainly, Dickinson will return to junior this year, where Celebrini will go straight to the NHL. That much we do know. But another great pick for us. They moved up in the draft to get all the way up to the 11th overall selection to use on the big 6'3" left shot D, and he's got his ELC officially on the book. So another great move there by the Sharks. The Utah Hockey Club have also signed one of their prospects, and that's 2022 second round pick Artem Duda, who's a 20-year-old left shot defenseman born in Russia, taken 36 overall in 2022. You probably remember hearing about him before. He was a bit of a unique case where he actually played last year in the Canadian University hockey division and playing for Toronto Metro University. Not a common path by prospects to go from Europe to Canadian University over to an NHL contract. But he gets his 3-year ELC now officially on the books as well. The Penguins have signed one of their prospects, and that's Tanner Howe. He also gets his 3-year ELC after being selected 46 overall in the 2024 NHL draft. Howe, of course, plays forward for the Regina Pats in the Western Hockey League, and last season was their team captain. We also got another signing in the NHL. The Columbus Blue Jackets have come to terms with Jake Christensen. He gets a 1-year deal at league minimum $775,000. Some other news and notes around the NHL. The Anaheim Ducks today announced they are promoting longtime goalie coach Sudsy Maharas. Of course, we probably heard about that as well. Recently had a pretty courageous battle with cancer that he won. So he returns to the team and gets promoted to be the director of goaltending. He's been a goalie coach in the NHL for quite a long time between the Ducks, and I believe before that he was with the Islanders. And they've hired Peter Budaj, former NHL goaltender, to be the goalie coach for the Ducks. Of course, I think he most recently worked with the Colorado Eagles, if I'm not mistaken. The Ducks today also announced that they've hired Tim Army to be an assistant coach, which will round out the coaching staff on the bench for the club as well. One of the more interesting prospects in the Islanders organization, unfortunately, won't be playing with them next year as he returns to Russia. Ruslan Ishakov has signed over to play in the KHL with CSKA Moscow. Of course, they already held his rights from before. Ishakov has spent the last couple of years in North America trying to get an opportunity. He's had some really good American Hockey League seasons, putting up back-to-back seasons with 50-plus points, and he's earned himself one NHL game. I don't know why a team that's aging, needing more offense, and trying to get more youth in their lineup would not give this kid more opportunity. From what I've seen, I know he's a bit on the smaller side. He's not a big player, but he's very creative, very gifted offensively. His highlights look really solid. I'm surprised he never got more of a chance. It's not like he's gotten a bunch of games that things aren't working out. I think that's his main motivation here. So he just wants to get more opportunity to play pro at the highest level, and he wasn't getting it. So they will still retain his rights until he's 27 years of age. If he returns to the NHL, he'll be owned. His rights are owned by the Islanders, so they can either sign him or they'd have to trade those rights to another NHL club. So it's unfortunate news for the Islanders' sake. I thought he was an offensive talented player that would eventually get at least more of a chance to see if he could make it in the NHL or not. But Lou decided that he's seen enough in one game, which I don't agree with. I think that they don't have a lot of prospects there on Long Island, and they get a few more now from this draft. But their cupboard is not exactly full. Some of the guys they do have, they need to give a chance to see what they have. So it's kind of disappointing, but he will go play in the KHL. We'll see what happens next for him. The Columbus Blue Jackets head coaching search is getting closer to being finalized, but not quite done. It sounds like Todd McLellan was the team's first choice, but he is now out of the running, and largely to do with the fact of how negotiations have went. So as I mentioned before in a previous video, either yesterday or the day before, when teams are hiring coaches that are still under contract with their previous club, that team that is still paying them has to be involved in the contract negotiation. So obviously we don't know what Columbus's offer to McLellan was, but let's just assume, because I think he was making around $5 million or so in Los Angeles, and if the Blue Jackets are only offering, let's say, $1.5-2 million or something like that, then the Kings need to continue paying the remainder of that salary, and they may not go for that. Now, of course, if he doesn't have employment, they're going to be paying him more money, but they're not going to want to pay that much for him to work for somebody else. It's different for them to pay somebody to not work for them. But at the end of the day, this negotiation may not have actually been because of the Kings' decision here. Part of this as well seems to be the actual negotiation between McLellan and Don Waddell and the Blue Jackets. So obviously they have to agree on a number, and then the team that's paying him as well has to be involved and agree. And it sounds more like it never really got to the point where the Kings had to really be much of involved because of the other part not being agreed to. So we'll see. It sounds like he's out there, which kind of leaves us down to Dean Evison and Jay Woodcroft. So the former Wild and Oilers coach, respectively, will be the front runners for now. We'll see if one of those guys end up getting announced here in the coming days as the next head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, some news on the Arizona Coyotes. We already knew this was coming because we had talked about it and done video on it before, but Craig Morgan, who still covers the Coyote beat, even though there really theoretically is one, and he is going to be doing some work to cover the Utah franchise as well, has confirmed that through Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner of the NHL, that Alex Merulo not only has said he was giving up his rights to the Coyotes and walked away, but it's all the paperwork is done. So he has signed and agreed to all necessary agreements and paperwork to relinquish the rights to the Coyotes. So sayonara, Alex Merulo. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, so to speak. He's gone. It's all done and official. It's not just something he said he's going to do. It's a done deal. So that's good news. So the NHL can officially talk to and offer this to other potential owners. Now, as Gary Bettman alluded to in recent media availability, any new owners are going to have some potentially the same issues that Merulo did. Of course, I think their way they do business and the way they deal with the local politicians and everything like that will certainly play a role in if this ever comes back to life and finds a way to be successful. But we do know that at this point, Batman said that he doesn't know how long before there'll be a chance to return or if or when it's going to happen, just because he doesn't know about the political climate there. But at least they can now, at least talk to other interested groups, and there reportedly were some, and see if they can kind of start the process to revitalize things and make it happen. I don't know, but we're still probably looking at a long stretch. I don't foresee any quick fixes there, but at least it's officially official. That's not just words. The paperwork is done. Merulo is officially gone from the NHL. Now, a couple other updates as well. Some news from the front office regarding the Colorado Avalanche. Recently, NHL veteran who retired, Andrew Cogliano, I think when we talked about his retirement I believe we had said in that video that it was expected that he was going to work with the team in some capacity. Well, now we know what that is. He's been named special advisor to GM Chris McFarland. So he will work in that role. And they're also bringing back recently retired goaltender Pavel Francouz, who will join the team as a goaltending scout. So obviously nice to have those two former champions and former veteran players involved with the organization in different capacities. Now, as I mentioned, we got lots of different rumors to take a look at. One thing that's not really a rumor anymore, but I guess could still happen, but it seems less likely now, is Jacob Trouba being traded from the New York Rangers. Now, we heard lots of talk about what was going to happen. At one point, the New York Post and Larry Brooks seemed convinced that the deal was going to go down and he was going to be traded. Even had it pretty well lined up how it was all going to work out, and it never did. Of course, we know that Trouba had a no-move clause, which then reverted to a modified no-trade clause once July 1st rolled around. New reports today from Emily Kaplan of ESPN confirms that Jacob Trouba indeed definitely used his protection of his trades being traded in his contract to block the trade. So there was a deal. There was an agreed-upon trade between the New York Rangers and the Detroit Red Wings. He was supposed to go to Detroit, and he did use his modified no-trade to block that. We talked about the fact before that it was expected that, because all this talk and chatter came about before this clause of his was even changed. As we mentioned before, the no-move clause was changing, and all the speculation and all the talk about him getting moved came out before it ever happened. So I don't know what he was told, what he wasn't told ahead of time or not. I don't know how all those conversations went down or didn't go down, but it was expected that when July 1st rolled around and he had to give his list of teams, that he was probably going to be making sure that teams that he felt the Rangers could move him to were going to be on that list so that they were blocked. Including Michigan, of course, Detroit, it was in the home state of Trouba. Probably one of the other places he'd love to play, just not now. Like I said, his wife is still completing her medical residency, and that plays a huge role, not wanting to uproot the family and everything. And it's not like she can just get up and move right now because of her career. And, he's made it clear in numerous interviews and reports and videos we've seen of him before that it's not just about him. Yeah, he values her career as much as his, and obviously views their relationship being equal, which is a great thing. And he intends to stay in New York at least until she's in a better situation career-wise that she could relocate. So we know that he loves New York too, and doesn't mean that they absolutely wanted to move as soon as the residency was done. I don't necessarily see that being the case either. However, with Kaplan's new report, she does confirm, though, like I said, that he did block a trade, and all the rumors about him having an agreed-upon trade to the Detroit Red Wings were true, and he's used everything in his power to make sure that didn't happen. Now, she says unless something happens in the next couple months over the summer that changes something drastically, which is not expected, then it's expected at this point that a trade's not going to happen, and that he will return to the Rangers in the fall. And obviously, between what she said in her article and then, of course, the recent comments from Elliotte Friedman back, it would have been, one of the Friedman probably at least a week or more ago now. I can't remember when Friedman's last piece came out, but it's been a little bit, that he said it was really hard on Trouba, and he felt kind of blindsided, and obviously had a real tough time with the process and everything like that. And clearly, Kaplan's words were, it was a very uncomfortable process for a number of days and weeks leading into all this playing out. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out in the fall when the season returns, when training camp starts and he comes back. Obviously, I don't suspect there to be any awkwardness around his teammates. They're not the ones trying to trade him. But I do wonder how feelings are. Does he feel hurt? Does he still have the same loyalty to the organization? It's just going to be curious to see how it all plays out. It's going to be a big test for him, I think, both emotionally, as a leader, captain-wise, and we'll see how things go. I think eventually he will end up in Detroit, and I wouldn't be shocked unless of course, we'll see what Yzerman in Detroit does this year. Maybe this time next year, they necessarily won't want to take him. Like, things could change on their side. So we'll see about that. But it might explain some of the other moves that a lot of us thought for Detroit were kind of weird. And we kind of suspected that maybe a Trouba trade was coming, but then it never did. And I wonder if Yzerman was kind of doing his other moves to kind of line that up, and now it's not happening. So I don't know how that's going to go. I mean, theoretically, with Trouba not being in a no-move clause anymore, they could put him on waivers, and Detroit could pick him up. So they really could play dirty here if they wanted to. However, as the report indicated from the New York Post in the original, when the story first broke, that it was a case of the Rangers were going to retain money here. I think they were going to be eating $2 to $3 million. So it was going to knock it down to about $5.5 million for Detroit and Yzerman to cover. So that can't happen on waivers. So I don't know that's a likely scenario to unfold like we've seen with Barclay Goodrow and the San Jose Sharks. So we'll see. But now we have confirmation, even though we heard lots before, about Trouba blocking trades. It indeed was definitely the case. Lots of other news around some other teams that could still be making moves. The Toronto Maple Leafs and youngster Nick Robertson. As far as we know, there's still no change of plans there for Robertson on his side of things. He would like to be traded. He does not want to re-sign with the Maple Leafs and wants more of an opportunity. The latest I've seen on him, I've come across an article suggesting that a couple of the teams that are at this point more likely for him to be landing spots will be the San Jose Sharks and Columbus Blue Jackets. And of course, unless he ends up being involved in a larger scale trade, which we don't know if Toronto's going to pull anything like that off. Obviously, if they do pull off a bigger trade, you would think that a player like Marner would be the one that's happening, but that seems less likely now too. But there's still some other names from the Leafs out there, like Timothy Liljegren, David Kampf to some degree. So we could still see, reasonably significant, but it might not be the blockbuster deal that people are kind of maybe hoping for. However, Robertson, very much still the same status quo, does not want to sign, expecting to be moved. And right now, those are the teams that appear to be the most interested, but they would be more interested in taking on Robertson for, whether it be a prospect or a pick or something small going back. But like I said, the Leafs may wait, try to smooth that relationship over if they can. If they can't, then obviously, maybe they hold on to him for a while just to see if there is a bigger trade that develops before they decide to move him out as maybe a single piece that goes somewhere else. We'll see where that goes. Frank Saravalli's indicating that the Edmonton Oilers are still very much likely to try to move defenseman Cody Ceci. Of course, they still have to sign Holloway and Broberg. They really don't have any money in their cap space to do that. Something has to give for a cost-cutting move. He believes Ceci's the most likely. And based on cap hit, contract status, I do think that it does make some sense. But another name when looking at things that I really think they should consider is defenseman Brett Kulak. A couple of things. If you take a look at their left and right side D, they don't have nearly as many right sides. So holding on to CC for another year might prove valuable just for that balance. Now, I know Cody's had his ups and downs and whatnot, but if you look at through the playoffs, I don't know that he was really their weakest defenseman. I know Darnell Nurse got a lot of flack, and he certainly deserved it at times too. But another name that I would consider moving, and it might be more challenging, he's got 2 years left at $275, so it's not quite as much money as Ceci, but Brett Kulak might be a name to watch. I mean, looking at the breakdown here, Steve Peters, who's a former NHL video coach who worked for the Coyotes and now works for PHNX Sports, had a Coyotes-based podcast with Craig Morgan and Leah Merrill, and doing some other stuff now, of course, but they still very much talk hockey there, and he does a lot of stuff with showing video and showing, kind of breaking down plays. And he put out a video today and looking at a lot of the Oilers plays where they had to defend against the rush and some of the goals they gave up, including the Stanley Cup winning goal. A lot of them kind of exposed Kulak for being weak off the rush and misreading and not kind of playing his man on the play and being out of position. It kind of pointed out that, to me, there's some of the other Ds sometimes get more of the criticizing, but Kulak could be pointed the finger to and be at fault for a lot of the critical goals against in the Oilers Cup run that ultimately got them close, but not all the way there. Especially that the game-winning goal in Game 7 that Sam Reinhart scored, Kulak backs off and doesn't play the aggressive side. Like when Reinhart's coming down the wing, that's his guy. Some people blame Leon coming back, but Leon, if that play is executed properly, Kulak comes over and closes him off the boards. Cody Ceci, who's his partner at the time, takes the guy driving the middle, and Leon Draisaitl, the back checker, he takes the far player across. Everybody takes their player. Probably nothing really develops. They get a weak shot on net, or it goes around the boards or into the corner or something else. And instead, Kulak doesn't play it right, gives Reinhart way too much time and space, and he comes in and he scores. And I'm not just saying they should trade Kulak over that one play. Like, there was a number of examples that Peters used in his video showing how a number of times off the rush that Kulak did not play the rush properly, which led to either a goal against or a really good chance against. And I don't know that he gets enough of the critical viewpoints as something like Nurse or Cece. So if I'm in Edmonton, I'd be careful on who you move. And you got to be careful there and make sure that you actually try to get better if you can. Like, you don't want to just move a contract for the sake of creating money. Like, you don't want to weaken yourself any more than you have to. And because of the fact that Cody Ceci shoots right, and I honestly think he was better than Kulak in a lot of the playoffs. So not perfect by any means. And over time, they need to get better on both of those guys to really elevate their D-core. But goes to show you how good of an overall team defense they were playing at large points of the playoffs, where despite some of these weaknesses, they still got as far as they did. So we'll see. But Edmonton definitely, they have no choice to make a cost-cutting move. Trevor Zegras is still another name to watch. There's still a lot of speculation. The Ducks may move the youngster. Not a given it happens, of course, but there's still a number of teams interested. The latest details I'm seeing on Zegras indicates there was about 8 to 10 teams interested, probably back before the draft. I think we're probably down to about 6 or 7 teams now. I think some of those teams would include Montreal, Philadelphia, Boston. I know the Calgary Flames are interested. I don't know that they're really going to be able to pull off a trade there. There's been mention of the Sabres, the Blackhawks, and the Rangers. And looking at all these teams, one of the teams that seems to be, I guess, the more interesting to me would be the Rangers. Because we know that from what we've heard, if the Ducks are going to trade Zegras, they would like something in return that's going to be maybe comparable age, comparable high draft pick, but a different style of player. And I just kind of wonder about, so we hear the same sort of things about Capo Caco with the New York Rangers. Now, Zegras has been more productive and has accomplished more so far in the NHL, in my opinion, than Caco has. So I don't think that's not a one-for-one trade. But I wonder if the Rangers could build a package around Caco to entice the Ducks to make a move. Obviously, they have some interesting other young players. Maybe it's hard to say what it would be, because they look at would they want a young defenseman to go along with Caco? Well, the Ducks have a lot of good, interesting young D themselves. Would they want another forward? It's hard to say. I don't know exactly what it would be. Maybe it's a draft pick. It's definitely not one for one, in my opinion. I would not trade Zegras for Caco, straight up. I would want more than Caco. If I'm Anaheim and Pat Verbeek, and we know Verbeek is a pretty stubborn when it comes to what he wants, and he's not making a move unless he gets it. So we'll see what happens. I just think the idea of a trade involving those two players, and obviously, like I said, it'd have to be more pieces. If Zegras is going to go anywhere, I do wonder, especially if you look at the Rangers, they're a team that, like the Maple Leafs, they kind of remind me of each other as far as how their off seasons have gone. They both had disappointing playoffs. They want to win a Stanley Cup. They're trying to get better. They claim that a lot of things are on the table for change, but yet we haven't seen anything too significant. Now, there's been some talk as well that a team like the Rangers would love to get Frank Vatrano back. We know Vatrano had some great time so far with the Ducks organization. Could there be a bigger deal that could evolve with Zegras and Vatrano both for something else? Hard to say. Like, there could be more pieces. There's just a lot there that I think each team likes that could kind of open the door for a larger trade, but we'll see. But Zegras is still very much out there. There's still interest. It's difficult to say what the likelihood is of a deal at this point. Montreal is still very much trying to make some cost-cutting moves, but again, you're looking at moving Christian Dvorak or Yoel Armia. Montreal would have loved to have moved either of these guys, but I think the problem is that they're both going to likely have to give for either of them. Probably don't move both of them right away, but as like an extra draft pick or incentive to take the contract on. I know Puckpedia has a new tool on their website where you can not only look at draft picks kind of value if teams are looking to trade up or down in the draft, but also looking at contracts to say, okay, what would based on the contract's value, and if you're moving this contract trying to create cap space, what kind of incentive would you have to include to get a team to take it off your hands? And it's a pretty good tool. And both those contracts came up as likely needing a second round pick attached to it. So we will see what happens. It doesn't mean at this point they could end up on waivers in the training camp, or once the games start. They could have a situation where maybe when camps open or later in the summer, as teams are unable to, maybe find that last player or two that they're looking for, maybe somebody comes and takes them off their hands. Again, it's not a given that these guys get moved either, but they're players that the Habs certainly still have interest to move, and it just has not materialized. And I think it largely is because of the fact that they just don't want to have to give the extra incentive right now. So we'll see. And lastly, in Winnipeg, Rucker McGroarty. Certainly things have gone from interesting to kind of backfiring and not looking so good for the youngster here. Of course, we had heard back before the draft that this player who was a first round pick in a recent draft, had a really good couple of years in college, wanted to be traded, and that there was no longer I guess you could say, a good relationship between the player and the team. And the story that came out was that essentially after his second year of college, he wanted to sign. The Jets were interested in signing him too, so that part was mutual, but he wanted to pass straight to the NHL, wanted immediate NHL games. The Jets were a little bit unsure of that. They're like, well, we're in the middle of a big playoff push. We're trying to win a division title. We'd like to get you in the mix, but we can't guarantee you a roster spot in the NHL. Like, you might need to do a little bit of time in the minors, and then we'll see how it goes. And if it works out to get you in, we'll get you in. And that apparently was enough to kind of deter the whole relationship. Like I said, this sounds like Cutter Gauthier 2.0, and they are great friends, and both know each other very well. So is there one influencing the other here? I don't know. But apparently the latest reports from Winnipeg media, this comes from both Mike McIntyre, Winnipeg Free Press, as well as The Athletic, have both talked about it, that there's at least two teams, there could have been more, but two that they know of at the 2024 NHL draft during the first round that thought they had a trade with the Jets to acquire this former first round pick. And apparently they were not necessarily aware right away that the main reason he wanted to be traded was because he wanted that immediate path to the NHL, and he wanted some sort of guarantee that he was going to get NHL games right away. And when that came up, they backed out. So clearly the Winnipeg Jets are not the only team around the NHL who had reservations about this. Other teams that are would love to have them didn't really want to do that either. Now, at some point, could a team pop up and be like, okay, yeah, we'll guarantee you a roster spot for next season, and maybe they work out a trade and he goes. But again, you have to have two things happen. You have to have a trade come together that the Jets are happy with, and then secondly, you need a team to give him what he wants so he'll sign. And that, so far has proven difficult. If that doesn't happen, then maybe he goes back to school in the fall and the Jets hold on to him. Maybe he's a trade deadline move at the end of next season, because of course a team can pick him up. He can finish his third year of college and then sign. But again, it's going to be the same sort of thing, right? If a team is willing to give him that spot and that path, then he'll go. But again, this is looking bad on him. It's going to, he had a good reputation of being a hard-working, extremely talented kid with good leadership qualities. And then this whole fiasco, to me, is really taking a step back here for a lot of teams to go, oh, we have reservations, there's red flags, this player is not necessarily associated with the same things anymore. So what's it going to take, for him to get his attitude adjusted, so to speak, right? So to me, it has potential to be embarrassing for him. If this drags on and too many more teams are like, oh, okay, well, we can't guarantee him a straight path to the NHL either. He might have to go into the minors. What's wrong with that? And if that's how a lot of teams feel, and that's the general overview of the NHL and teams about this player, what does that tell you? Like, you're going to have to change your stance. You're going to have to eat crow. You need to go back and sign with the Winnipeg Jets and put in your time like everybody else, not be so entitled, or go back to college, wait it out. Hopefully you dominate hardcore and really get a lot of attention, and somebody pops up and be like, yep, we'll give him what he wants. But then, like I said before, like you're kind of creating a monster, so to speak. What's going to happen if you tell him that and then you give him the roster spot and 20 games in, you're like, ooh, he's not ready, or this isn't working out. Doesn't mean it's going to, but what if it did? Then what happens? Is he going to be like, oh, trade me? Like, it's amazing how entitled some of these kids are. And it's just unfortunate, but it's backfiring hardcore on McGroarty, and it could get to the point where it's could get embarrassing, and certainly taking a big impact to me on his reputation. So we'll see. But over time, Winnipeg looks like they're doing the right thing, and if they get a deal they like, they'll do it. And if not, I don't know what happens. Maybe he goes back to school and this thing drags out longer, but time will tell. Let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.